Hello, one and all, and welcome to the latest episode of Opposite Field, where Colin and myself talk about Rob Manfred's least favorite sport in the world, Major League Baseball. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Huh? Doing all right, doing all right. Ready to dive into some a not so great week for both our teams, but also a week that really kind of put the league's parity into perspective for this coming season because there's been a lot of surprises, a lot of players and teams that have kind of just kind of gone went under the radar coming into the year that have and then maybe they're flashes in the pan, but we'll see, and we'll discuss the comings and goings of the past couple weeks of the baseball season as we had our predictions out there, and then we kind of tried to iron out the kinks of the format, and we're ready to rock. Well, not fully because we hit a couple of more technological snags, and if you follow me on the American Scouser Astavatenipa, the Thursday night is just the night of technical difficulties, and that is kind of just my general aura. I bring nothing but technological mishaps to the table, so that's what we're rolling with right now. But I'm going to start with just we're going to go with the teams that have uh, surprised us the most coming into the year because I think that's the easier thing to pinpoint because players you can kind of be like, well, this guy's in a better situation. There's different opportunities that have been granted to players, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of teams that you when we did our previews going like, oh, they're going to they're going to run away with something or they're going to be generally shit. And either one way or another, there's been a few through the first 20 odd games of the year that have defied those expectations. So I don't want it to like be like just spew everything out at once. In in a generality, which team has been the one that has surprised you the most in any fashion you could think of to like surprise you, like the amount of runs they're scoring, the way their pitching is gone, so on and so forth. Which team has been the biggest surprise of you for the first 20 games of the year?
The Pittsburgh Pirates. And I think, and that is not a knock. It's the other way. I think they are a fun team to watch, and they got guys like Cruz, and um, I just think that when we were picking our teams for division, the Pirates were a team that I kind of was like, yeah, I could look if they played their cards right and things went their way that uh, it could, and there's a lot of luck involved. I could see them getting into a wild card spot, but I did not see them being as good out of the gate as they have been, and they have certainly surprised me with, you know, I don't know if um, I'm sure you did, but just the series that they played last week against the Baltimore Orioles and how they were able to come back and win an extra inning twice against that team, which I put Baltimore and you put Baltimore in the in a top tier of the American League and probably baseball in general. Uh, so for the Pirates to be able to um, go toe to toe with them in a series was incredible. And I just hope that this is something that they can continue because, you like to feel for a team like the Pirates to have a good and successful season.
Yeah, and the biggest thing in baseball is you want to see small market teams succeed because it kind of breaks the argument of, oh, just all these teams that just spend a ton of money are the only ones that can win. And I get if you look at the standings, it kind of parses itself out where you're like, yeah, okay, the Dodgers are in place, the Yankees are in first place, the Braves are in first place. Yeah, but if you see teams like the Pirates piecing things together the way they have, it does kind of warm the cockles of your heart a little bit because they're doing it in a fashion where they don't have one player particularly tearing the cover off the ball. They're kind of yeah, like you said, they're doing it with those clutch moments, that kind of dark arts of baseball where they're coming up with those hits in the right spot. They're picking people off the scrap heap. They have guys that they drafted just on an absolute rocket ship to the majors. But the biggest thing so far that I've seen from the Pirates is their rotation, their kind of land of misfit toys has been really good. And no one has been better than in my mind in the National League at least than Jared Jones. A guy who 32 to 2 strikeouts to walks through 4 games for a guy that I had never heard of coming into the year is wild. And I think if they don't if they stay in it enough where they're not getting like pillaged at the trade deadline, they could they could sneak into a wild card spot because I do think it's going to be in the end a two-horse race in the NL Central.
Yeah.
I still think Cincinnati's going to make their way up, and one of the two of the Brewers or Cubs are going to kind of regress, just because I think there's too much that can go wrong with both those teams, and Cincinnati is kind of just still feeling their young team out. They kind of need to get their sea legs under them. Whereas Pittsburgh can kind of like stay in that holding pattern, and with the the Diamondbacks not knowing whether or not they're going to kind of get that upward trajectory or not, and the Mets kind of being one big injury away from completely falling off the face of the earth. That last wild card in the NL is kind of up for grabs, and it's coming from a division that we thought was going to get one team and one team only.
Well, my whole thing is that I think that for Pittsburgh to be in contention for most of the year, because you are absolutely right about their starting rotation. You know, guys like Martin Perez,
Yeah,
who who was
Red Sox legend.
Red Sox legend. But then here's the thing about that though. So you Red Sox legend, we joke about that because he had a kind of a mediocre career with the Red Sox. But then he goes to Texas, and it's kind of rejuvenated his career
Yeah,
down there. But then goes to Pittsburgh, and I'm looking at his numbers right now. He's got a 2.55 ERA as a member of the Pirates. My thing is, I think that it's very, very important um, for a guy like Mitch Keller to to be, I guess, in a way, the ace of the team. And ironically enough, he has the highest ERA on the team, which is 4.5, and it's not something you want to see from a number one guy, especially with a team like Pittsburgh, where they are kind of like, this is who we are, this is what we got. No one's walking through that door, and what they are somehow in it by August, and they can pull off some kind of crazy trade. So these guys have to be at their best, especially. And it's funny too because we look back at picking teams in the division, and we kind of were like, oh, you know, the NL Central is kind of like the AL Central, where anyone could win it. But like, I would say that today the NL Central is leaps and bounds stronger than the AL Central, and that I could see
Yeah,
any
because it
one of
doesn't
those
have the
teams.
White Sox in it.
Well, yeah, that's the
who,
thing. It's to
who
get the White
somehow
Sox in it.
do. Yeah,
But
we'll get there at some point.
like, okay, so like the Cardinals are in last place in that division. However, I unless they just totally like uh are just not what the Cardinals are as a franchise, um, I could see the Cardinals making a run in July and being in there by August, September, because that's just who they are. You know, the Brewers. I think the out of the Cubs and the Brewers, and this might be because I picked the Cubs over the Brewers. I think that the Brewers are more likely to fade than the Cubs because I think the Cubs, uh, if they're in it, are more likely to pull a trigger on a big trade than the Brewers are.
No, I agree on that front because the way the Brewers kind of shed salary and moved people around heading into the season,
Hmm.
they've had a couple of things kind of work their way. Well, work out for them in terms of the early year. Like Christian Yelich looks as if he's not back to his MVP form, but he's at least a guy that you can put out there for 4 out of 6 games.
Yeah.
Like he's already having to take days off, which is problematic, but that's 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 not
That's just who he is now.
yeah. But when you got you're trying to get people in the lineup like Perkins and Shurio,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of find spots to give them. To have a guy at that point being able to be given days off and it not be super detrimental
Hmm.
isn't the worst thing.
Hmm.
But for a guy that leads your team in home runs, you kind of want to get in the lineup as much as you can.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how they navigate those waters as it gets deeper into the season.
Mm.
The yeah, my biggest thing with the Brewers is, and you talked about how the pitching staff for uh, Pittsburgh, like Mitch Keller as the ace, you kind of expect more from him. Like the, my thing with the Brewers is they don't really have an ace right now.
Yeah. I mean,
They're a team that has been relying, and I think unhealthily heavily on their bullpen right now.
yeah.
And the kid that they're running out as the closer, Uribe, while Devin Williams is out, is shaky as hell.
Hmm.
And everybody behind Freddie Peralta gives me no confidence.
Yeah.
There's just the propensity for the wheels to fall off of the Brewers is incredibly high. I just yeah.
But it
More
all.
than
But it.
the more I
But
look at this pitching staff, and it's more coming from the fact that I picked up Joe Ross in fantasy the other day, and he got absolutely obliterated, which led me to go into a deeper dive on the Brewers pitching staff. Like, okay, who can I go get tomorrow? Because they were playing well, and I'm like, oh god, I don't want any of these guys.
But like, it's funny too because you also don't seem confident in the Cubs.
No, because it's a team that it's definitely a show me team where you're like, I want to see something from the Cubs that makes me believe in what they're gonna do for the year because it's
But
and it seems
don't you think if they're in it by July 31st, August 1st, however you want to call it, don't you think they're the ones that are going to pull the trigger and go get someone over the Brewers?
Oh,
Even
over
over
the
the
Brewers,
even over the Reds. I know you're high on the Reds.
over any of those teams. You're 100% right. They are the team that if you were going to pick a team from that division that is going to try to address a deficiency, even before the trade deadline, I think before like it gets to that point, they are a team. I think they're going to go get a starting pitcher earlier
Okay.
than later,
Okay.
because we just kind of talked about how much of a mess the Brewers rotation is. The the Cubs is worse.
Yeah, it's bad.
I think that's the thing that's holding Chicago back right now.
But you know what though? I don't know if any, outside of like, and we'll talk about it later. So maybe I shouldn't say that. But I just want to say like, is anybody's rotation good? 1 through 5 right now? Maybe, maybe the Yankees, maybe. But like, is anybody good?
No, and I think that's a question that can be asked throughout the entirety of the league.
Yeah.
Is the starting pitcher kind of like a dying breed?
I
How
Yeah,
how they look.
which is ironic because a few years ago we were talking about how the managers would be doing these bullpen games, which I guess has
Oh,
caught up to the league because everybody seems to be doing it.
but the crazy thing about that is, as much as it's something where there's an over reliance on the bullpen, and these openers are garnering more and more favor, and as much as people are viewing it as this just tactical genius, it's not really working.
No, no, no.
I think the only team that I've seen do it with any regularity is the Dodgers, and
Yeah,
they're using kind of Tampa Bay guinea pigs to do it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I refuse to watch those games. I hate it. And we I think we agree on the fact that, like, yes, there has to be, and I'm sure over the course of the season we'll talk about it at great depth. The ability to adapt to new things within the
Yeah.
sport, and to kind of not just be that old person going like, well, back in my day, players did this and pitchers went 7 innings. And guys, I'm not of the mindset where there can't be new things, and there can't be better ways to like attack the game of baseball. I'm not sitting here going, oh, these people that do this for a living are wrong. But the biggest thing about like openers and bullpen games is it's proven time and time again that it doesn't work
I mean,
long term.
I think I'm the opposite. I think I'm the old man in the room because how so you're gonna run out a guy that's used to pitching 1 to 2 innings, have him pitch 3 to 4 innings after your starting pitcher only goes 5 innings, and then have no bullpen. All right, case in point, if you got a team where both offenses are struggling and you go to extra innings twice, back to back games, which is not out of the realm of possibility in today's baseball. So you mean to tell me that you're just gonna burn your pitchers twice, back to back nights, and just be like, okay, well, if so and so has an 80 ERA by the end of the weekend, that's just how we're gonna run it. But then, like later in the season, you know, you got 4 pitchers on the DL uh, because you mismanage because you just want to do these experiments of running 2 inning pitchers out for 4 or 5 innings.
Yeah, and and the two biggest examples of it in recent times were Tampa and Arizona,
Hmm.
and they both made it to the World Series, and everybody's like, oh wow, they did these things in it, okay, it's great
Oh,
to get you. It's great to
oh wait,
get
you
you
know
to
what?
the
You know
dance.
what? What did they have in common? They both
Yeah,
lost the World Series.
yeah. It's great to get you in the dance, but when you get on the dance floor and then you slip on a banana peel and then you break your face, then what was the point of the thing? If you're not going to be able to get there and then go win, yeah. And I understand over the course of the regular season, it's 162 games. There's a lot of times where you have to kind of do a lot of just finagling with your roster. And there's times where you're gonna have to do a bullpen game because, like you said, you're gonna have a couple starters injured at a certain point, and you're gonna have to just call up a bunch of guys from AAA and make it work for 2 or 3 days to get you back to where you need to get into a certain rotation. I understand that. But when you make that like your identity and you're using that deep into the playoffs, it's not going to work.
But
And
you
the
know what?
fact that teams still try to do it, it blows my mind.
But you know what? You're absolutely right, and I'll tell you why. The biggest kind of X factor in this whole argument is that when you do a bullpen experiment, you know, you do it against multiple teams over multiple games throughout the season. When you get to the playoff, you're facing the same team 7 days straight. And if you got a guy who's not a very good relief pitcher that you can hide over the season, face this, because obviously
Yeah.
you make the playoff, they're the best teams to make a playoff. So if you got a guy who you can easily hide against multiple teams, face the same team's best hitters, they're going to get exposed. And that's what happened with Tampa and the Dodgers, and that's what happened with Arizona and the Rangers last year. They've ran out these guys that would normally have 4 ERAs, 5 ERAs against the best hitters, and I think you and I would agree that Texas lineup is pretty good on paper, and
Yeah.
when you're facing somebody that's not used to facing good hitters every day, they're gonna get exposed, and that's what happened to Arizona.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that this is something that becomes kind of it goes the way of the wildcat in football where it and the fact that it's gone as long as it has and is still garnering usage worries me
But
because it's and well
But how much is that? How much
back
is
to the
that?
old man yelling about how much analytics have taken over
That's what I was
baseball.
gonna say. Is how much of that is the analytics? How much of that is that the guy saying, just keep him out there. 40% of the time, he's gonna get a strikeout. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
and
that's what it
how that
is.
these guys like I think the average starter in the league now is going barely 5 innings, and
Which is
these
crazy because let's
and teams are using like close to 6 pitchers a game on
but
average.
but I'll go even further. It's crazy because I'll bring up your team. You paid $350 million for a pitcher who can only go 5 innings. That's not what you're paying for. You're
Yeah,
paying for 7 innings, at least, in my mind, not
yeah,
5.
yeah, and that's it's the sad state of affairs where you kind of have these guys that you want to kind of be able to push to those points and get over the hump a lot of times, especially in divisional games
Yeah.
where it's in the grind late year where you're jockeying for division titles and you really want to just kind of stake your claim to divisions and playoff seeding. If you can't throw a guy if you can't get a quality start out of a $325 million pitcher now, what do you think you're going to work him up to it?
Yeah.
I just don't I don't see the logic behind it.
You're paying him that money because you shouldn't have to work him up to it.
Well, but and I'll disagree on the front that like a price tag shouldn't immediately just be like, oh, this guy should just be like Greg Maddux immediately.
No.
There's always gonna be a transition period, especially for the like the Japanese imports that come in.
All
And
right, then maybe that was a
and I
bad
get
maybe that
that,
was a bad idea. But let's say Garrett Cole then. He's making $300 million.
but my thing that I'm agreeing with you is there has to be less training wheels. There has to be kind of all right. Sometimes you just got to see the guy get out of trouble. Yeah, everybody wants to, with Yamamoto. They want to reference that first game where he got absolutely beat up. But
Yeah.
since then, there's just been such kid gloves with him where it's the second he hits a certain pitch count, even if he's cruising, he's out. He's done. He's done after 5. He did his part, and then they just start warming up 2 people in the pen at a time, and then
Yeah.
they get the and that's so frustrating because especially now because of the rules with the relievers where you have to
Yeah.
you
Yep.
have to face a certain number of batters and you can't go lefty righty and you can't do all that crap anymore, which I understand from the pace of play standpoint, yada yada yada, but it also makes things there's gonna in the same regard for all the time that you're shaving from not being able to make those changes when you want to and pitch clocks and everything. It's coming around on the back end because these guys that shouldn't be in there for as long as they are walking players and then
Or giving a pitch.
then they hit their threshold of batters they need to face and then the manager goes and yanks them.
I
So
mean,
you're just delaying the inevitable.
and the other thing is like, man, I think we're gonna talk a lot about this, so I don't want to like jump ahead, so I'll save it. But it, I just, I guess I'll say it. What's more valuable to lose? A starting pitcher for a few months or a bullpen help? In my mind, I think it's hard to have a good bullpen than a good rotation. And if you're gonna lose a couple guys in your bullpen, then you're already done because your starting pitcher can't pitch every day. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I, no, and I'm here for it. Like burning out relievers is a significantly bigger problem
Yeah.
than
Than a
losing a
one
starter.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Cleveland losing Bieber and Atlanta losing Strider is massive to both teams. But they're still in first place because they have pitching depth and they can kind of weather the storm of those losses.
And
But
same thing.
if either of those teams lost their closer this early in the season, they'd be fucked.
Same thing with the Yankees. With Garrett Cole being out, they have still been able to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in baseball right now. And yeah, they have an awesome lineup, but you still can lose games 9-8, and they got the pitching that prevents them from doing that. You know,
Yeah,
if they had a couple of guys in that
there's a lot
bullpen,
of
because the Yankees bullpen has been, it's not been great the last few years, which is why I think a lot of fans would say it's the biggest problem for the Yankees the last few years. It's been, in my mind, fantastic this year. And if they didn't have that and didn't have Cole, I think the Yankees would be one of the worst teams in baseball, regardless of their lineup. Because,
yeah, yeah,
again, you can still lose games 9-8. But the fact that they have good pitching to make up for the fact that they don't have their ace on top of their lineup, it shows why where they are is where they are.
yeah. They've had a lot of guys that had subpar years kind of make a bit of a comeback. And I think that's the biggest part of how they've navigated this early part of the season because they are a team where when everybody saw Garrett Cole go down and they're looking at the closer role and it's like, oh, you're really gonna just go hard in the paint with Clay Holmes? The guy, yeah, granted he's got a small sample size of decent amount of success. But if you're in those shark infested waters of the AL East, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for him to come into some situations that are not going to be optimal. And
Yeah.
so far, he's kind of navigated them.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing with the Yankees so far is how they've not only kind of resurrected the career of Marcus Stroman and Carlos Rodon is showing a pulse again, but that their middle relief, they're kind of spreading it out. They have
Yeah.
a bunch of guys that are getting usage, but it's not like, oh, this guy pitched 4 days in a row. This guy pitched 3 days in a row. There's a bit of breakup where they have confidence in enough guys where they can go, okay, the Stroman's going to go 6 today. Then we got this guy for the 7th, this guy for the 8th, and we got Clay in the 9th. And we're going to work with that. And if things go wrong with that setup, so be it. We'll go again tomorrow. That it's something where there's so many teams now, and you look at Pittsburgh. We're going to go back to them. The fact that I think they don't have the bullpen depth where they can't give Bednar a break because
Yeah.
he's a guy that can't get out of his own way right now.
Yeah. Yep.
And I feel bad because it's something where you know that if he just was able to get that little bit of respite, he could probably get out of his own head and figure it out
Yeah.
and kind of get at least get back to the mean. Like
Right.
he's probably not going to be at like all-star level that he is because he's just kind of he can't locate. He's having issues with a lot of different shit right now.
Yeah.
But if they had the ability to kind of like go like, okay, you're just not going to pitch for 2 days, and we got people that can kind of cover your ass. Whereas like the Yankees go, God forbid Holmes had 2 or 3 games in a row where he like gave up a couple home runs and they had to kind of give him a little bit of time on the shelf. They could do that right now with how their bullpen's constituted.
Yeah.
There's so many teams that I don't think either have that mentality where they're going, okay, we're going to make sure that this is the schedule for today. These guys are going to do this, this, and this. And unless things completely fall off the rails and whoever's starting gives up 7 runs in the first inning and we have to make wholesale changes, this is how it's going to go. And then we'll get the next group of guys go tomorrow. That way we keep everybody fresh. We keep everybody in good spirits. Even if they give up runs, know that when your name is called next, you're not going to be passed over because, oh, you had a bad game here. So you're all of a sudden out of favor. So that I think that regularity with opportunities and that faith that Aaron Boone has been like, hey, I know that if I just give these guys these shots in these spots, that so far, at least, there's been nothing that's gone particularly super wrong for him.
Well, my whole thing with the Yankees, and I think the only thing that is should be an eye opener to Yankee fans, but won't be, is I think that they are going to really find some tough times within the division. And we saw Toronto take 2 out of 3 from them. Uh, and they have not played Baltimore yet. They have not played Tampa Bay yet. I don't care about the Red Sox. They're going to beat the Red Sox every time. But but Toronto and Baltimore and maybe Tampa Bay are going to play them. Because here's the thing about the AL East, not just the Yankees, just the AL East in general. I think that everybody wants a piece of that division. Not just Baltimore, not just Toronto. You know, Tampa Bay had won that division more recently as consecutive time in the last few years. Toronto has never won that division in the last, and I'm saying in like a span of
In
like,
recent times, yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
uh, and Baltimore won it last year, and you and I back to Baltimore. You and I think that they are the team to beat. I still think they're the team to beat in that division. Um, One of the things that uh, unlike Tampa Bay, that Toronto and Baltimore, especially with Baltimore's new owners, um, is I think that when push comes to shove, they're not going to be afraid to make the moves to compete. Um, we've already seen it with Toronto a number of times, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised. They've already made a big move in getting Corbin Burns uh, in the offseason. It wouldn't surprise me if Baltimore saw something they needed and went out and got him. Their farm system is so deep, um, and if they need a renter player, if they need a player that they could sign for 2 to 3 years, if they need a player that's under contract that can help, I think they would pull the trigger. Um, and I think the Yankees need to be aware of that. You know, I think that it's going to be really hard to slug your way through that division. The rest of the league, yeah, definitely. They could do it. That division, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that in my eyes, it's kind of like an iron sharpens iron type of deal. Whereas for so many years, the Yankees kind of coasted like, oh, we're the Yankees, and
Right.
we'll just figure it out, and we'll get to 90 odd wins and figure it out when we get there. And when we get to the trade line deadline, we'll go get a couple guys that ESPN tells us to get, and then we'll we'll,
Yep.
we'll try to make a run. Whereas now they do have a team that is youthfully exuberant in Baltimore that now has owners that aren't going to penny pinch, and they have a Toronto team that if if they can kind of keep everybody healthy, I think that's their biggest thing is keeping Barrios in decent shape and making sure that either of Guerrero and Bichette don't miss like a month
Yeah.
because there's a lot of guys in that lineup that you could miss time and you're not going to really miss them. You can kind of plug the holes in. But if either of those guys miss a significant portion of the season, there's just going to be such a deficit
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I don't think they have. Toronto has good players, but I don't think they have depth. I don't think they have a team that you can really do the next man up cliche and be like, oh, well, yeah, this guy, and you can do the whole replacement player war shit that I sit there and go like, oh, well, I got to go do some math. But regardless of that, I think yeah, the AL East is a division that you're going to have that balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to just have uh, great pitching and not being able to score, or being able to tear the cover off the ball and not get anybody out. You're,
Yeah.
you're going to have to hit that happy medium more than any other division in baseball, in my
Oh,
opinion.
easily. Yeah. Yep. But um, I just think that the thing about Baltimore is I think they believe, which is the biggest thing. I mean, they believe so much that calling Jackson Holiday up this early uh, shows just how much they think that they could go all the way this year.
Yeah, and I applaud them for realizing that keeping him at AAA does both him and them no good.
Yeah,
Was he going to go there and hit like 330 for a couple months, and then I I understood the sentiment in the past of trying to keep that uh, service time clock at bay as much as you could. As much as I hated it, and we talked about in the past about how grimy like the Mariners were
Yeah.
in terms of really manipulating the service time of their really talented youngsters.
Mhm.
It's it's something that I don't think teams anymore are going to be really there's always going to be exceptions, but I think generally across the board, they're going to try to get these guys up, see what they have, and if their expectations of these guys are even like 50% reached, they're gonna drop huge extensions on their lap to kind of buy out their arbitration years and kind of
Yeah.
move forward. They what was once a blip on the radar with the Evan Longorias of the world, with these guys that are like, oh man, they're just committing to the future now. I think it's going to be more commonplace, and Baltimore I think is going to be at the forefront of it because they have so many guys that they drafted in like the past 5 or 6 years that they're going to have to make these decisions on fairly soon. And if they can go get them locked up now, and then they can structure the contracts where they're not getting raked over the coals and until like 6 years from now, and then they can kind of make the decisions of which guys fit still at that point. And if it's all of them still, and the new ownership wants to kind of keep the core together and pay the luxury tax and all that, God bless them. But for now, I think it's something where you can do a lot with a youth movement and it not necessarily be a white flag anymore of okay, we don't have enough guys to do it, so we're just gonna bring up a bunch of cheap youngsters. It is something where like, hey, if we have enough faith that this guy being able to perform at a major league level, we're just gonna go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I don't want from Baltimore is I don't want two things. Is I don't want them to sit on players that they don't need. You know what I mean? If you can find a way to better your team and you have the guys that you want to stay, uh, you're obviously not going to trade Jackson Holiday. You're obviously not going to trade Cedric Mullen. Those kind of guys. But you got a surplus of other guys that are really talented and you don't really have room for them, then I want you to make them available for some veterans that are going to help your team win now. On the other hand, I don't want Baltimore to turn into the next San Diego Padres, where you just
Oh yeah.
destroy your farm system for a bunch of guys that you're going to overpay and not win anything. Because, I mean, you look at the Padres team today versus how it was in 2020 when they were doing all these moves. Not all the same guys are there. I mean, sure, you know, uh, Musgrove is there, and some other guys are there, but like Blake Snell's not there anymore. Mike Clevenger's not there anymore. You know, a lot of these guys are not there anymore that they sold the farm for, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's going to come back in about a year, two, three, to really bite the Padres in the ass.
Yeah, they really burnt their
And I don't
their
want Baltimore
farm
to do that.
system to the ground for nothing. But I genuinely think that Baltimore, despite all of the turmoil that they had kind of behind the scenes, I think if there's ever going to be a trade that they make to send any of these young guys out, it's going to be like a generational talent trade. I don't think they're going to uh, give up three top 10 prospects for a guy in his walk year.
Yeah, like
or
I don't
yeah,
like I don't think they're gonna give up three future All Stars for Mike Trout. Let's put it that way.
yeah, I'm I'm hoping that just for Baltimore's sake, because for baseball, for Baltimore to be relevant is good because they are a good baseball city, both when the team can get people in, which if the team's good, they fill that park, and also for the visiting fans if they
Yeah.
can go in and like see these guys. That's great.
I
That's
think that, speaking of the city, I think that this is the time now to make the Baltimore Oriole as relevant as the Baltimore Ravens are for that city.
yeah, and you kind of have to capitalize right now because if and we're saying with these contracts that they could do and move the money
Yeah.
around and do all that uh luxury tax limbo. You can, but there's only so many times that you can give those deals before you're
Before you
going
got to
to hit
pay
that.
up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna hit that point of no return.
Right.
And I do agree that if they're going to kind of get baseball fever back in that city, they can't kind of be like, well, all these guys are like 22, so we got plenty of time.
Yeah.
You kind of have to strike while the iron's hot, and you went and got Corbin Burns for a reason.
Right.
You've brought up Jackson Holiday this early for a reason. You've given Gunnar Henderson the keys
Yeah.
to that, both his spot in the lineup and his spot in the field, for a reason. You've made Adley Rushman the face of your franchise for a reason.
Yeah. It's
For
to
you, yeah,
win now, to win future games. Yeah. But to win now is why you did everything.
yeah, yeah.
And again, okay, I guess to put it in this way, if you're, for all intents and purposes, if you're going to play the Los Angeles Dodgers in the World Series, you need to be at the Los Angeles Dodgers level. And in order to do that, you got to make some tough decisions that are going to better your franchise. And if it means giving up two future All-Star generational talent to get someone that will help you beat the Dodgers, um, and you can afford to do it, you do it. But if you're just going to do it like the Padres to say we're building a super team that won't amount to anything, that's where I have a problem with it.
Yeah, you have to pick your spots.
Yeah,
You can't do it like you're playing uh the MLB The Show equivalent of like Ultimate Team. I
right.
don't, it's just like, oh, we just get the highest rated player at every single thing. If it doesn't, if you don't have that good mesh, then there's no point.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I just think that this is the time for Baltimore to to step up and be the face of the AL for the next couple of years.
Cool.
So
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's something where, yeah, they have to kind of not rest on their laurels and on the fact that they got a very young team, and just kind of go for it when they have the chance, and kind of not make excuses if things go poorly.
yeah. Um,
So, yeah, well, we've talked about surprise teams. Now we're gonna go to the individual side of things. And what players have you seen so far, or player? We can narrow it down if you so choose. Who is somebody that you've seen through the first 20 odd games of the year that you've gone, this guy seems to be either playing above his head, or is it something where you see sustainability from a guy that's off to a hot start?
you want me to go first? You want to go first?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a bad
Oh,
breath.
okay. I'm gonna say Tanner Houck from the Red Sox, and the Red Sox. We all know how I feel about the Red Sox right now, but if there are any like semblance of of hope or a glimmer of happiness for the Red Sox, it is uh, a few of those guys in that starting rotation. And between Whitlock, who unfortunately got hurt the other day, and Tanner Houck, I think that I
Crawford
am.
too.
And who?
Cutter Crawford.
And Cutter Crawford, yeah. These guys are surprisingly okay. If the Red Sox were not as bad as they are, weirdly enough, you would look at this rotation and look at their numbers and say that's the best rotation in baseball. Outside of Brian Bello, who has struggled, uh, coming from a guy that they apparently think is their ace, has struggled. Um, the rest of those guys have been very, very good. And I'm talking like one low two ERA, good. And that includes Tanner Houck and what he did last night for a Red Sox team that is beyond garbage. But to go a complete game, three hitter, 9 strikeouts against a Guardians team that is not bad at all. I don't think they're that bad of a team. But
Well, they're the big thing with Cleveland right now is they're scoring a shit ton of runs for
yeah,
so for
and
Houck to do what
so
he
for
did.
him to be shutting
Yeah,
them out,
that was the big surprise for me. Yeah, I agree.
very, very impressive. And I'm sure there are so many other players I could name, but with the Red Sox being, in my opinion, as bad, as mediocre to bad as they are, this is a very big bright spot and a big deal for that team.
Yeah, and that's a silver lining you have to take in a year where
You have to take
I
it.
think I think you reside to the fact that they're going to if they're going to go anywhere, it's going to kind of be like 500 is
Yeah.
their ceiling, so to
And even
speak.
to get to 500, it's this rotation that would take you there.
Yeah, and that's wild because you look at that lineup and it doesn't like scream we're going to score a million runs, but for them to be so inept at scoring runs as they have been, to be not in like White Sox Marlins territory, because if you look at the just like runs scored, they are kind of middling. They're not they're obviously not White Sox bad, but they're probably like middle of the pack.
Well, the irony is, it seemed like once Trevor Story got hurt, the entire lineup was like, well, screw it.
Oh
And
well.
and honestly, maybe it's anger, maybe it's rose-colored glasses. I don't know, but I'm beginning to think Rafael Devers is not what he's paid to be. He is not a face of a franchise. His defense is terrible. In fact, that's the other thing about the Red Sox.
Yeah,
20 errors.
they boot the ball
They
everywhere.
are the worst defensive team in all of baseball in 20 games. 20 errors. You would think that's an error a game, except you look at some of their box scores, it's 4 or 5 errors a game. And you look at the okay, so say you don't look at the
They
box
come in
score.
waves. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Then you don't look at the box score, right? And you say like, oh my god, the Red Sox just lost like 7-3. Gee, Tanner Houck must have got destroyed. No, he gave up
It's like
no runs.
500 runs.
Yeah, 500 runs. And then you're like, okay, well, it must have been the bullpen. No, it's all the defense. It's terrible. They don't have a real second baseman. And now they don't have a shortstop because Trevor Story got hurt. They just put Devers on DL, but it doesn't matter because his defense is awful. So it's like the rotation. That's what we're talking about. The rotation, like you kind of have to feel for these guys that are going out there throwing lights out and not getting run support and getting the worst defense play behind them.
Yeah, and that's kind of be disheartening for a team that's pitching as well as they have to just and we're talking about guys that don't go like deep into games to end up getting pulled early because innings got extended because people booted the ball around the field.
Yeah,
And I think that's a lot of times people don't look at stats without context.
right.
Like, oh, this guy only pitches 5 innings a game. Why is he only pitching 5 innings? Oh, why? Oh, he gave up 12 runs, but only 8 are earned. How did those 4 unearned come to pass? And you go back and you look at stuff, and it's like, oh, he had to pitch an extra 23 pitches in the 4th inning of a game because they made fucking 3 errors behind him.
And that's the thing is that they're only pitching 4 or 5 innings because by the 5th inning they're at 96 pitches because you know the guys are booting the ball and letting people on base.
And a big thing with, and I've seen it with the Dodgers too. It's not even plays that end up errors a lot of times. It's plays that it's poor positioning or ones where like the scorers are going, oh well, he beat the throw out or anything. Like, well, if it's something that should be a routine throw to first or a routine force out at second, just because a guy beat something out because a third baseman took his sweet ass time, you shouldn't really.
Yeah,
They're and now that's its own thing where it's like, oh well, it should just be kind of its own different ruling. I I don't want to go down
I
that rabbit hole.
I just think that like one of the biggest question marks going into the Red Sox season was what was their pitching going to be like, and surprisingly now, if you just take a step back, if you look at this rotation, you would think, without context, the best rotation in baseball. And then you zoom in and you see how bad this team is. It's like it's an enigma. It's an enigma. It's a you have no
Yeah,
idea
they're
how
either like
they're this
first or
bad.
second, like Stars ERA.
They're 10-10 right now today because they lost again to Guardian, and you go 10-10. Oh my God, they must be awful at pitching because most of the time it's pitching that you look at when you look at bad baseball teams. And it's like, oh. And then you look at it and you're like, ERA is 2.2, ERA 1.6. And then you're like, oh, fucking 20 errors in 20 games. No wonder why they're bad. And it's just unacceptable baseball being played in Boston.
Yeah, and to back up your point, they even Bale, who is their kind of their de
De
facto
facto
ace,
ace, yeah.
who has pitched the worst of them, his ERA is 3.92, which in today's era is not horrible.
No, but
But
Bayo, when Bayo pitches though,
no,
he
I
looks
understand.
bad
No, I
compared to these
understand.
other guys.
He's
He looks like he has
he,
no control sometimes.
but he's also a guy that I feel at least when he isn't striking people out, tries to pitch to contact, and
Yeah,
when you have a team that basically commits an error a game,
yeah,
that's not helpful when you're trying to get yourself out of a jam
right,
by trying to get people to put the ball on the ground and your guys are booting it all over the field.
yeah,
That's just gonna fuck with your head more.
yeah. And then it carries, but that trickled, right? So like,
Yeah.
yeah, so like Garrett Whitlock throws, let's say 5 innings of 1 run baseball game, right? And the score is 4-2 because the Red Sox commit some errors. But then you bring in someone like Kenley Jansen, who you already can't trust, uh, and then he can't trust the defense, so he gives up home runs instead because he can't just throw ground balls because he's not going to get outs. So he leaves them over the plate, and then they get hit out of the ballpark.
Yeah, and my thing with Jansen that just and it's kind of been this since his last season with the Dodgers. Everybody knows that he can't be a setup guy. Any team that has both Atlanta and the Dodgers tried it at various points to kind of be like, all right, he's in a slump. Maybe we got to try somebody else. And it was kind of like that, like Juris Familia thing, where
Yeah,
if you're going to move him out of the closer spot, you do so at your own risk.
right.
And with the Red Sox, I don't see that there's another guy that you can put there.
There isn't.
As much as they kind of are spoiled for choice with guys that you can go in like inning 6 and 7, I don't think that you can supplant him yet, even for as much uh, uh, anxiety as he provides. There's there's got to be.
But I mean, it's not just it. I mean, they re-signed Joey Reyes, who was already terrible last year, and he's not good this year. But like, this is just a constant problem with how they operate their pitching after their starters are done. It's like they don't know who to turn to.
Yeah, and that's I don't know. And you gotta at some point, because I'm trying to just put everything into perspective of the the pitching staff. There's the only guys that are really horrible are like mop up guys,
Right.
and those are ones you can't even kind of take their stats into play because what a guy that comes in a blowout and gives up 3 runs in a third of an inning, like what 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 are your expectations of that person?
Yeah.
You don't. So you kind of just let that be its own thing, and yeah, it's going to affect the overall stats, yada yada yada. But it's not something that, like I said, it's all about context. Where if you see like, oh, this guy's stats are horrible, I'm like, how many important games has he pitched in? Oh yeah, he has a 6 ERA, but he hasn't pitched in a game that's been within 2 runs. So who fucking cares what
But
what his ERA is?
the problem with the Red Sox is those mop-up guys are pitching those close games. That's the problem. They're not pitching games that are 4, 5 run difference. They're pitching 1 run games, and then they're getting beat because they have nobody else.
And they are stuck in those spots
Yes,
because they can't score
because this is
runs.
what they do. Yeah, yep. But I mean, I could sit here and talk all night about the Red Sox, but I have to just give credit where credit is due, and their rotation has been excellent so far.
Yeah, and it's and that is something that needs to be commended with. And of course, people will be like, "Well, it's a small sample size and everything, and they don't go deep into games." But to have three three pitchers with 4 starts and ERAs under 2, you kind of gotta uh, tip your cap to them. And to have a guy that is struggling right now in Bayo in terms of laboring through a lot of his starts and still not have his stats be completely awful. I think that has to give you a bit of positivity going forward that he will be able once he figures it out a little bit more that there's going to be a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so because they clearly believe in him if they wanted to give him that money. So I hope so. But as for the other guys, um, you know, it just proves that when someone with real talent, like a Garrett Whitlock or Tanner Houck, is healthy, and are able to do what um, they can do, I think that um, they're able to pitch to their ability, and you don't have to worry about them. My thing is that I just think that mentally they're going to get so defeated and so deflated with having to worry about what's behind them in the field that they're going to make mistakes. And then that 1 ERA is going to blow to 6 in 3 weeks because they can't trust anybody.
It's it's something that you aren't. I'm not going to say that it's like, oh well, you shouldn't be worried about that, but it is a thing where you can look at it and you can have that optimism that there is going to be that turnaround, but you shouldn't feel bad about not being fully confident that those days will come because eat and that's kind of like the big thing about baseball is even if you kind of fix one problem, there could be something else that goes
Entirely.
wrong. Like the
Yeah,
pitching could come back down to earth.
right.
The fielding could get worse.
Yeah, yeah,
So there is things that could kind of hinder their progress, even if they do kind of figure it out with the bats.
yeah.
And I'm happy that you went with a pitcher for your surprise player because in my head the surprise most of the surprises, if you look at it just from a statistical standpoint, have come from pitchers this year because there's a lot of guys that have maximized their time on the field because as we were talking about before, the starting pitcher has just become something where they you don't you don't even have expectations anymore of them going deep into games.
Right.
You look at all of the peripherals and the stats that we could just kind of beat into the ground and just be like, well, these guys don't do this, that, and the other thing anymore, and it's just gonna not lead to anything positive. But my my biggest takeaway from the early part of this season is how many teams are not necessarily uh, relying on the players that they brought in free agency, but relying on a lot of like homegrown guys.
Mm,
And for my my surprise, it's kind of like a couple of angels. And it's not just because the our picks are once again uh, in the AL West, making us look like idiots because the Mariners can't score runs, the Astros can't get anybody out, and they're just looking really really bad. But the Angels are, they're under 500, but they're kind of. I think this is like their last hurrah in trying to convince Mike Trout that he should kind of be a lifelong Angel because they're trying their damned, and the two guys that, well, I'll focus on one because if we push it to two, then we're just going to be here all night.
Is it Ward?
It is Taylor Ward
Yeah.
because he is a guy that has taken so much of the impetus for Trout to have to do everything offensively.
Yeah.
Because he's, and yeah, Mike Trout leads the league in home runs. That's great. But Taylor Ward nearly has double the RBIs,
Mhm.
which I think is a huge part of where Mike Trout's struggles over the years have come, because his big thing is like, okay, I'm gonna be like bat in the heart of the order, even when like the end of the Albert Pujols era, where it's like, oh, we can't move him, and then we're gonna try to bat Mike leadoff and see
Yeah.
if that, and they kind of just it. I've never seen like a superstar treated
So
like a not superstar, and
right,
and that's
right.
one of the big things with the Angels, that how completely fucked in the head they are,
Well, they
and as
also
much
were
as
like they also were kind of like for the last few years were like, you know, well, we got Otani, Mike Trout, just stick him somewhere else in the lineup.
yeah, and now that and as much as people want to just meme Ron Washington, he's a guy that's been around this game forever, and he knows how to just get the best out of people.
Yeah.
Those like Texas teams that he took to the World Series
Yep.
were not world beaters, and he
No.
was able to do a lot with a little, in my opinion. And now I think he's somebody that's just gonna give guys the enough rope to hang themselves with, per se. Like I'm I have I'm gonna put this lineup out, and I have full trust in you guys to go out there and hit and field and pitch. And if you let me down, you're gonna get one. You're gonna get times where you're not gonna have great things, and I may have to sit you, but I'm going to have the expectations that you work hard enough to get back in the lineup. And when you get back in my good graces, I'm not going to hold the bad performances beforehand against you. I'm going to get you back in there, and I'm going to get you back in a spot where you're comfortable. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you went 1 for 11 this week, so I'm going to move you to the 7 hole. Because if baseball has shown anybody anything, these players are gigantic creatures of habit. And if you
Yeah.
break those habits, a lot of times bad things happen.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest help to the Angels at the start of this year is the fact that they have somebody who's going to just not really fuck with their flow.
Do you think the Angels are gonna crawl up and take this division?
I I I don't want to jump off that bridge just yet. But it's something where you can't rule it out just because of
Everybody else.
how mediocre
Yeah.
everybody else has looked.
Yeah.
Like I think the Astros will turn around, but see it in our yearly kicking the kicking the kicking the dick Seattle.
Seattle.
That I don't understand how, and they're kind of uh like a worse version of Boston right now.
Yeah.
They have pitchers that are
Great.
doing gangbusters. They cannot score a fucking run to save their lives.
No. Nope.
And that's maybe they are somebody who's going to try to go poach some of these people from the White Sox, cuz I know that the White Sox and the Marlins are the two worst teams in the sport
Yeah.
record-wise. They are also the two teams I think are going to have absolute fire sales.
Oh yeah. Of
I
course.
think I
You know
think
what though?
Chicago. Chicago's going to be playing a full AAA lineup by the end of the year.
I agree. It's ironically they sold one to, or Tim Anderson went to the Marlins, which is
Yeah.
pretty funny. But I disagree with you with the Astros. I think they're done. I think this is the end of the Astros.
Okay.
Um, they're not a good team. They have talent, but they're not a good team. So much so that when he comes back, I'm going to make a prediction, and I think with the news of Spencer Strider going out on the DL, I think Justin Verlander will pitch for the Atlanta Braves
Ooh.
at some
Okay.
point this season, because I do not think the Braves want to, and the Braves are going through some stuff right now that are dire to their divisional title, and losing Ozzy Albies and and obviously their best pitcher. And I don't think they want to give this up to the Phillies. I think they will go out. I think that the Astros will fall so far out of it, they will put Verlander up. I think the Yankees will try to get him, but I think it'll be the Braves that will win out that conquest, that sweepstakes.
Okay. But he did go to. I don't want to say that's in the area, but he's close enough. Virginia, you can kind of
Yeah.
by proxy, a couple states away. It's the South. They're all the same.
Oh, but
But yeah, I think that's a decent shout. Like I just like we've done with like Tampa the past couple of years. I don't want to put dirt on their grave until I know they're dead.
yeah,
And it would make me the happiest boy in the world if this is the downfall of the Astros is they just completely fall off a cliff again.
yeah,
I don't want there. I almost don't want there to be like a gradual decline, and you just kind of see them, uh, as Mike Tyson so eloquently said, fade into oblivion. I don't want them to have that dignified of a demise. I want
yeah,
them to just completely fall off a cliff and stay behind the soon to be Sacramento A's for
yeah,
the entire year. That would make me so happy. I would never love to be wrong more than to see that happen, but we'll see
yeah,
how that goes. If they're willing to just throw up the white flag, it's early, but we'll see.
yeah.
But let me pull up one last thing in terms of surprises
Okay.
for the season. In your opinion, who? All right, because I'm trying to figure out the way to word this because I want to kind of have it be all encompassing. As either a team or a player, you can choose either route. Because mine would obviously be the Astros.
Okay.
What is the team that we had high expectations for going into the season that you see play horribly through the uh
Couple of games.
first 20 games and be like that was a big surprise of how poorly they played, and you've made it known that you think the Astros are dead. So which team that has played poorly, surprisingly, do you think has the biggest chance to turn things around?
I would say the Cardinals. Just because I never want to count the Cardinals out. No, you know what? I wanna do a two-way tie. Two-way tie. Uh,
I'll allow
okay.
it.
The Cardinals are one, and the Minnesota Twins are the other. Both of
Okay.
them, I think, have really underachieved in the first couple of games this season. But I think both of them have enough talent, um, and also wouldn't be afraid to, more so the Cardinals than the Twin, um, to get the necessary help to turn it around. But I think it's between those two teams. Um, and I just think that you could throw the Mets in there, but I don't think that the Mets had any real expectations this year. Um, but I think that the Mets are a team that, like, if they somehow crawl into it, they'll make a move to try to jump up. But for me right now, it's the Cardinals and the Twins.
And I'm just gonna piggyback on because mine was the Twins.
Okay.
Because if you look at just like the buzzsaw of a schedule they've had to start the year,
Yep.
starting off with Baltimore, and then you had the Dodgers, and then you had Cleveland. Was it at Cleveland?
Yeah.
They there was it make like just getting swept by Baltimore, and then having the Dodgers in they because it there's just there's respite coming. They have 7 games against the White Sox in the next like 20 days. They get the Tigers at home. Then
Which isn't going to be easy.
Then they get the Red Sox. They have a big homestand with the Red Sox and Seattle.
Oh, well,
so they could really get things right.
Yeah.
In the next like 2 to 3 weeks.
But I think
they could really go. They're 6-11 right now. They could easily go and just triple their win total.
But I think if things stay the way they are, and my pick, I think that it's going to be hard for them to stay on the level of Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that in terms of that division, I don't think Cleveland is going to have staying power.
No, I don't either.
In Kansas City, that's another show me team where I want them to kind of have extended success. If we're sitting here at the end of July and we're talking about Kansas City still, that's probably a good thing for them.
What about Detroit?
Detroit, my biggest thing with Detroit is their arms are ones that I could see all getting hurt within like a month of each other.
Okay.
I go back to, it was something that I heard referenced on the radio. Tyler Glasnow was talking about how he was talking about all the arm injuries and how the players union was blaming it on like the pitch clock and stuff like that.
Yep.
He goes, well, our biggest thing is we're told from like age 11 to throw as hard as you can until your arm falls off.
Yeah.
And then we have great doctors to put you back together. And then you just lather, rinse, repeat.
Right.
I think Detroit doesn't have guys
doctors.
Well, no, I think they don't have guys that are not going to follow that trend. They have guys that are going to just blow people away, and that could just lead to everything falling apart.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that's I think in the coming weeks, a lot of our conversations are going to
even out.
So, but they're also going to circle around those like central divisions because in the end, I think there's going to be runaway winners.
Yeah.
Despite all the teams being banged up and stuff, I think there's going to be 2 teams at the top of the East in each league and 2 teams at the top of the West in each league. And they're kind of going to figure it out over time. Whereas the Central, I think it's just going to be ever flowing.
Well, I think
outside of the White Sox.
Well,
I think we can both say right now the White Sox are going to
they have
never.
they have the
Yeah,
number one pick in the draft next year. Yeah.
yeah.
So no, but I think that the AL East could flip flop a few times this year, more than I think you think. I don't think there's
Okay.
a one team that's gonna stay in control of that. As
No, but
long
I
as
think like
people,
there's going to be two. I don't think
you don't think it's gonna be a three horse race.
I I'm always down to be wrong, but
I mean, I mean, I mean,
I,
you're right. Though.
from what I look at
You
it
are
right now.
right though. Let's take out the health. Obviously, health is a big factor. But let's
Yeah.
assume that Toronto's healthy. Let's assume that the Yankees are healthy, and let's assume Baltimore's healthy. You don't think they're gonna flip flop?
We'll see. We'll
Maybe
see.
not. Maybe not Toronto. They would be the weakest of the teams. But I could see the Yankees.
I
I could see the
actually I like
Yankees.
Toronto better than I like Tampa this year.
Yeah, well, I do too. But I'm saying
Well,
like,
at least
but
just
that's
well,
what I'm
just
saying
based
is
on the
that's the
first month
three-team
things.
race. It's
Yeah.
New York, Baltimore, and Toronto. I could see Baltimore being in first place for 4 weeks, then falling off. The Yankees climb up, then falling off, then Baltimore, and so on and so forth, with a mix of Toronto being in it at some point.
Yeah. I
It's
don't
not
think
going to
you're off
be
base for that.
it's not going to be the train wreck that the AL Central is going to be, where the division leader is going to change every day. But I think it's going to be very competitive in the AL East this year.
Uh-huh. And
I mean, it would make it more exciting,
yeah, definitely, definitely.
you
But
know.
I think at that point we're gonna kind of wrap things up.
Yeah,
Uh, we're just on YouTube this week, but the goal is to kind of sort out
yeah.
the
We're gonna get
streaming
all
out
of
of
it
town
taken
details, and
care of.
we're gonna be
Yeah,
hopefully on Facebook and Twitch and
Spotify and
Instagram
all that.
over the coming weeks. We're gonna
Yeah,
get an opening sorted that's not the countdown video. Got people working on that, so the goal is to kind of spread the wings a bit more.
yep,
But this is new for the both of us, so we're kind of just yeah figuring it out as we go.
yep.
Uh, this has been episode 62 of Opposite Field. I'm Trevor. That's Colin. We love y'all, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.